She had nothing. No home, no savings, no hope. But through resilience, determination, and one life-changing decision, she built an empire from the ground up. This is her story. The coldest night of her life. Sarah Mitchell sat on a park bench, wrapping her thin coat tightly around her 4-year-old son, Jake. The city lights flickered above them as she tried to keep him warm, fighting back tears. She had lost everything. Her job, her apartment, her support system. She had no one to call, no place to go. Jake shivered against her. "Mommy, when can we go home?" Her chest tightened. She had no answer. That night, as she held her son close, she made a silent promise. This would not be their story forever. She would find a way out, no matter what it took. The hustle begins. With only $20 to her name, Sarah did the only thing she could. She started looking for work. She knocked on doors, visited restaurants, applied for cleaning jobs, but no one wanted to hire a homeless woman. Desperate, she walked into a small coffee shop and offered to clean the floors for tips. The owner, an elderly man named Mr. Thompson, watched as she worked tirelessly, scrubbing every inch of the shop. At the end of the night, he handed her $50 and a free meal for Jake. "Come back tomorrow," he said. Sarah did, every single day. She saved every dollar she could, and when she had enough, she made her next bold move. She started her own business, The Road to Millions. With a few supplies from the dollar store, Sarah started a cleaning service. She printed flyers, went door to door, and offered free trials. Her first few clients were skeptical, but when they saw her work, word spread fast. Within 6 months, she had 5 employees. Within 2 years, she had dozens of contracts with offices and luxury apartments. And by year 5, she was the CEO of $1 million cleaning empire. The same city that once ignored her now sought her out for interviews, awards, and speaking engagements. And the best part? Jake never had to sleep on a park bench again. Giving back. Now a successful entrepreneur, Sarah never forgot where she came from. She created programs to hire and train struggling single mothers, helping them get back on their feet, just like she had. She had built her own success. But more importantly, she was building hope for others. And it all started on the coldest night of her life. Because sometimes, rock bottom isn't the end. It's the beginning of something greater. 10 years later, the grand ballroom of the Mitchell Foundation's annual gala was filled with some of the most powerful business leaders in the country. At the center of it all? Sarah Mitchell, now a self-made millionaire and one of the most influential philanthropists for single mothers. She stood at the podium, her son Jake, now a teenager, dressed in a suit and tie, watching proudly from the front row. She took a deep breath and smiled at the crowd. 10 years ago, I was homeless. I had nothing but a child depending on me and a promise I made to him, that one day, things would be different. The room fell silent. Everyone knew her story, but hearing it from her own lips made it even more powerful. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have money, but what I did have was determination. And today, I stand here, not just as a business owner, but as someone who is making sure no other mother has to go through what I did. Behind her, a massive screen revealed the night's biggest announcement: $10 million in grants for single mothers to start their own businesses. Gasps filled the room. Sarah smiled. No mother should have to choose between feeding her child and chasing her dreams. And starting today, they won't have to. The audience erupted into applause, some even wiping tears from their eyes. Jake ran up onto the stage, wrapping his arms around his mother. "You did it, Mom." Sarah hugged him tightly, whispering, "No, baby. We did it." As she looked out at the crowd, business leaders inspired, single mothers given new hope, lives being changed, one thing was clear. Her story wasn't just about survival, it was about lifting others up. And the best part? She was just getting started, 20 years later. The sun shone brightly over the city as the Sarah Mitchell Empowerment Center opened its doors for the first time. A massive crowd had gathered, former single mothers she had helped, young entrepreneurs she had mentored, and some of the most powerful business leaders in the country. Standing at the entrance, Sarah Mitchell, now a multimillionaire and one of the most influential voices for struggling families, cut the ribbon with her son Jake, now a successful businessman in his own right. The applause was deafening. Sarah stepped up to the microphone, looking out at the faces in the crowd. Tears welled in her eyes. 20 years ago, I had nothing. No home, no savings, no hope. But I had my son, and I had a promise to build a life where he would never have to suffer like I did. She paused, taking in the moment. This center isn't just about me. It's about every mother who has ever felt like giving up. Every woman who has been told she can't succeed. This place is for them. The audience rose to their feet, clapping and cheering. Jake took the microphone, grinning. And I just want to say, Mom, you're the strongest person I know. You built something out of nothing, and now you're changing lives. Sarah wiped a tear away, pulling Jake into a hug. As she looked around, seeing women walking through the doors of the center, ready to start their own journeys, one thing was certain. She wasn't just a millionaire. She was a symbol of hope, a living testament that no matter how low you start, you can rise. And as she stepped inside the center for the first time, she smiled. Because the journey that started on a cold park bench had led to something greater than she ever imagined. Her legacy was just beginning. 30 years later, the sun was setting over the city skyline as thousands of people gathered at the grand opening of the Mitchell Global Empowerment Network. It was no longer just a foundation. It was a movement. Across 50 countries, Sarah Mitchell's programs had helped millions of single mothers rebuild their lives, start businesses, and escape poverty. And now, it was bigger than ever. Standing on the massive stage, Sarah, now in her 70s, looked out at the sea of faces. Some were CEOs, some were young mothers, some were children who, like Jake once was, had started with nothing but a dream. Jake, now a successful entrepreneur and philanthropist himself, stood beside her, smiling. Mom, look at what you've built. Sarah took a deep breath, her heart full. We built this. She turned to the microphone, her voice strong despite the years. Decades ago, I was a homeless single mother, struggling to survive. I thought my story would end on a park bench, but instead, it became a story of hope, of strength, and of change. The crowd erupted in cheers. This isn't just my success. It's proof that no matter how broken your beginning is, your future is still yours to write. Tears filled her eyes as she looked at Jake, then at the thousands of people her journey had touched. If you're struggling, if you feel like giving up, don't. Keep fighting, keep believing, because one day you'll look back and realize you didn't just survive, you changed the world. The standing ovation that followed was unlike anything she had ever experienced, and as Sarah Mitchell stepped off the stage, her work complete, she knew one thing for sure. Her story would live on forever. Not just as a millionaire, not just as a survivor, but as the woman who turned struggle into a legacy. 50 years later. A statue stood tall in the center of Mitchell Legacy Plaza, surrounded by a breathtaking garden where people from all walks of life gathered. The plaque beneath it read, Sarah Mitchell, from homeless to millionaire, from survivor to world changer. Across the world, her name was more than just a story. It was a symbol of hope, a reminder that no matter where you start, you can rise. At the annual Mitchell Foundation Gala, leaders, entrepreneurs, and families whose lives had been transformed by her programs filled the grand hall. On stage, Jake Mitchell, now an elderly man himself, stood behind the podium. His voice was steady, but filled with emotion. 50 years ago, my mother made a choice. She could have given up. She could have accepted defeat. But instead, she built something greater than herself. The crowd listened in silence, some wiping away tears. Today, her foundation has helped over 50 million single parents. It has funded businesses, rebuilt communities, and changed lives across the world. He looked up at the massive screen behind him, where a picture of Sarah in her younger years, holding his tiny hand, appeared. Mom, your legacy will never fade, because every single person in this room, every single person your work has touched, is living proof of what you built. A roaring standing ovation followed. Somewhere, in the hearts of millions, Sarah Mitchell's story lived on. Because she hadn't just gone from homeless to millionaire, she had gone from forgotten to unforgettable. And that was a legacy that would never die.